Hello, good evening everyone. Welcome to camp and welcome to our my favorite lecture series, Urban Talks, where we invite architects, landscape architects, urban designers and professionals in this field of urban development to speak their inspiring speeches in camp for people in Prague. I'm Rozálie Kašparová. I'm also an architect and urban designer. I've been working for Prague for quite some time, so the questions I will be asking in the end of the evening will be from a perspective of an architect, so you just know what's my background. And today, I'm just your host. Today, the lecture will be held by Marta Maccaglia, and in Spanish pronunciation, I understood it's Maccaglia, which is also more Czech. She's an Italian architect who since 2011 lives and works in Peru, where she also established her own studio, Semillas. And the primary aim of her work is exploring and developing education opportunities in remote parts of Peruvian jungle. I think we all agree that children should have the right to the education. And while approaches to education differ in different cultures and places in the world, on the globe, one thing remains common. It should be a creative environment. And that's the aim of Marta's work and her colleagues. Marta's work emphasizes principles that are primarily based in local culture, traditions, resources, always work with the context and its surroundings. And one of the most important things is the processes also always include the local community, which is really the basis of sustainable architecture and urban development. And not just the work, but also the decision-making and the financial models of her work is based not just in public money, but also works with private sector, which I'm very excited to hear about, because I think there's a lot of things that we can learn here in Prague and Czech Republic in general. Marta's work and what we see today was also here. You could have also seen it in camp on the exhibition A Lot with Little, which was held here in the winter. Personally, I think it was one of the best exhibitions here, and as a practicing architect, it was super inspiring to see all the work of sustainable architecture and urban design approaches. And today, I'm very excited to hear more about the topic, doing more with less. If you have any questions during the lecture, you can either remember them or you can put them in Slido, an online app, under the hashtag Urban Talks. So now I just welcome Marta. Hello, and welcome to the stage. It's yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm Italian by nationality and Peruvian at heart. We are going to reflect about architecture and civilization, and I'm going to present you 4 projects, and for each project, 1 reflection. Thanks to Camp for the invitation. And I feel very proud that the Semillas work was part of A Lot with Little exhibition. Yeah, don't build walls in our minds. We are living in times of war in Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, racism, social injustice, human rights violation. We build walls and destroy walls because we can't live in community. And we normalize social abysm and inequality opportunities. So in this reflection, I think, what is the role of architecture? And I begin with a video that captures the contrast between different parts of the globe, revealing the construction of cities in native communities and in urban development in European cities. So, shaping the concept of civilization. And it is on the basis of this reflection about contrast that I think that our mindset is colonized. Think, for example, that in Italy, we learned that the history of Latin America began with the arrival of Christopher Columbus, erasing the millenary knowledge of native communities. And in the imaginary collective, we have the image of the indigenous as enemy of progress, the wild, the uncivilized. But in the jungle, there are territories and populations which have been completely abandoned by the government. They're in the map for being extractive areas, but there are communities that exist and resist timeless knowledge and open wounds. So, what is civilization? Are native communities enemies of progress? Are they enemies of civilization? In the jungle, the native community live together with nature, and the concept of private property doesn't exist. But we internalize a different concept of progress and well-being. And it is on the basis of this economic development that since the 40s, we have observed a strong migration from rural to urban areas. Think that in the 40s in Lima, there were 500,000 inhabitants, and today there are 10 million inhabitants. There are images of Lima, an incredible extension of city that the anthropologist José Matos Mar defines it as popular overflow. And this model creates a sustainable city. So, what is progress? Are native communities enemy to progress? So in Semillas, we are in a permanently reflection and questioning. And we believe that we have to unlearn, listen, co-create, to design, manage and build livable spaces coherent to the ethics and spirit of each society. In 10 years, we managed, design and build 10 schools, 2 students' residencies, 2 community centers, and our work received a lot of recognition, such as the Divya Award last year or the Global Award for Sustainable Architecture. But the main challenge that we have and the main prize, I think, was to achieve the trust of the communities and work in cooperation. So we do so in architectural and cooperation project. We accompany communities generating alliance between local partnership and international partnership, between private and public institutions. So we think from the jungle, we think from the site where we work, and in our practice we have 3 offices, 1 in Lima and 2 in the jungle, where from we work and where I lived and researched myself for 7 years. And in this context of the jungle, there are communities that are known for being the main narco-trafficking area of the country, and think that 9 out of 10 students don't see development opportunities in their territory, so they dream to escape from the jungle. And there are no services about schools or healthy services. Think that 95% of the school lack water and electricity, and 45% of the school need a complete renovation. So there are schools self-built by parents or with precarious material that are waiting the government that built a school. But when the government built a school, they are schools that seem bunker of cement in the middle of the jungle that are completely discontextualized from the context. So children in the jungle learn the same way as the children in the city do. In this process to design the best school for the children in the jungle, we think that our brain needs to get excited to learn, as the neuropsychologist José Ramón Gamo says. No? So we think that the school have to contribute to create excitement, and we wonder how can the children that we saw in the video that grow up in nature can feel emotion in schools surrounded by walls that seems prisons, marching to enter the classrooms, and in classroom with high windows so children can be distracted. So we imagine a school thanks to a participatory process. So the first project is Jerusalem de Miñaro School. It was a very important project because we started managing participatory processes in this project. And this process mustn't be understood as linear or fixed in terms of time, because each step is part of a global process. We identified community through participatory research. In the case of Jerusalem de Miñaro community, we identified the community thanks to the support of the Ministry of Education, and there were 120 students that studied in terrible conditions, and the parents built a school 40 years ago, and until 2017, the the government didn't support the school. So we prioritize this community, and when we have the fund, we started the process of design, and in the step of participatory rural appraisals, we know each other with the community. We understood the problems that they have, each other's potential problems, and we built common dreams. In the participatory design, we explored the imagination of the inhabitants, their needs, their current activities in the school, and the activity they desire to have. And we reflected all these dreams in the design of the school. The next step is participatory construction. We organized construction workshops and work with the local workforces. This is how we learn from each other and supported the local microeconomy. Finally, the monitoring stage, and this is a photo of the inauguration day. And if normally the inauguration is the end of the work of an architect, we say that it is only the beginning of the life of the project, because it's finally when we can see the impact our work in the people's life. And here it is, the school. The school is not only a school, but it is a meeting point for the community, because in this rural area, maybe the school is the only public infrastructure in the community. And the multipurpose room could be used as an exhibition space, as an assembly, as an auditorium, as a dining room. And the corridors are an extension of the classrooms, and the covered patio are all gathering places. The columns and beams framing the bookshelf and the windows fold and make a little roof for shadow. And the interior and the exterior space are always connected. The nature is sacred, and the architecture adapts to the tree. And in this case, the tree marks the entryway of the school. And the kids made their imaginary world, and they appropriate of the school. So the bricks are climbing spaces, and the wooden panels are hiding space. So they create their imaginary world. And I remember in the inauguration day, the principal of the school, Idu, asked to me for the key of the school to close the school, because he told me, Marta, if I don't close the school, the kids want to escape. But he looked around, and there isn't an entryway or an exit way, you know. And after 6 months, I visited the school, and Idu told me, Marta, now I have the opposite problem. The kids always stay here. So if children normally wish to escape from a school, here they want to stay on all day long. The second project is Santa Elena Secondary School and its residents. It is an ongoing project. We started with this project in 2014. We identify the community thanks to the Ministry of Education for its strategic point in the rural area. Because in a rural area, community live dispersed in the jungle. So it is impossible to have one school for each community. So it is very important to have a territorial focus. And the potential of this school was to have more than 200 students. In this case, the community donated the land to the Ministry of Education, and for the soil condition, we designed the school in the east of the lot. So we put the program on the east side, and we grow up in a second floor, and we divide this block into parts, and in the middle we have an interesting hall with a double high ceiling patio. In this area of the jungle, there isn't water and electricity supply system. So we design a roof that works as a to catalyze the rainwater in elevated tank that function by gravity to the bathroom that are put in the extreme of the building. And here it is, a corridor across long of the building, and if normally in a classroom there are height windows, here the windows are from the floor to the roof, and you can connect it visually, horizontally, and vertically in all the building. And here it is. In the last week before the inauguration, the mayor of the district donated us some balls of cement, and the parents built the field, the sporting field. So now the school, it isn't only a school, but it is a meeting point for the nearby communities. And here it is, the south side of the building, the northern side. And what happened after that? Because it was the first secondary school in this rural area. And I explained that it is located in a strategic point, but in a rural area, these students had to walk 4 or 5 hours to go to school. So the parents provisionally built this residence, and in 2019 asked us for help. So the number of students increased from 20 students at the beginning, and now there are 200 students. So we designed a students' residences. The strategy was to design a modular and incremental building. So we propose timber portico system, and in the bottom, little modules of beds that are individual cabins. And this system could grow or depending on the number of the students. And one of the more satisfactory achievement that we have was that we work with together with the teachers. In the secondary school already exists a workshop of carpentry. So the students of the school designed their own furniture for the residencies. So we work with the students, and they built this. So here it is, the cabins. That is an individual space. Here, a semi-collective space. And this object could be moved in the space, and it could be transformed. And the sliding doors could connect with the corridors that could be used for study, and with a very little budget, we could benefit in this time 40 students. So here it is, and we had the money to build the floor, but not the rest of the building. But now we are building the extension of the residence, and here it is, the school with its residents, and the school is the heart of the community and of this rural area. The third project is Technological and Environmental Laboratory in Mencoriari. In this case, we are in a native community of the central jungle of the ethnia Nomatsigenga, and the reflection is the dissolution of the school, because we wonder where are the knowledge? The knowledge are in the school or outside the school? So we started in a participatory way. We research about the memory of the native community. We research about the territory of the indigenous community, and we plant a common dream. And we asked to them, what is technology for you? No? And people expected that we built a computing classroom, no? Because we connected the concept of technology with cellular, internet, and all these things. But no, for them, technology was to have tools to improve their own life, and they wanted to learn about medicinal plants, about coffee, about the forest. So we built a forest lab. And yeah, this little lab means a lot for us in our reflection and in our philosophy. The space is divided into area. On the left, there is an open classroom that connects with the classroom that they are in this side of the lot. And in this side, there is the laboratory plant, a dryer plant, because in this space they process the medicinal plants. And in the middle, there is a recycling rainwater system that function in the dryer space. And so here it is. In this space, the doors could be opened, and the connection between the forest and the classroom is immediate. And the interior space take life with the use of the children. In this space, the open classroom in use. And in this space, you can feel the forest in the interior space, you know. And in this space, you can see the layer of the school. In this area, they plant medicinal plants. In the second stage, they have class, and in the backdrop, there is the forest. Thanks to this project, born the project and the program, the territory of knowledge, where the millenary culture is preserved. We are working with the Ministry of Education, trying to connect local knowledge with the Ministry of Education curricular program. Well, the last project is Altanapatti Nursery School, and we are going to reflect about the social production of habitat and its participant. In this community, we had to build the school, while the Ministry of Housing is developing a program of house for the community. This program tried to improve and rebuild rural houses to improve their quality of life. So we find ourselves in a community which is in the middle of an urban transformation. And to improve their quality of life, the inhabitants would go from this typology of house, of big wooden houses with semi-opened kitchen and indoor resting areas, to this 22 square meter house entirely made of cement for families with perhaps 4, 5, or 6 children. So, and the inhabitants ask themselves, how am I going to live there? Of course, they are not going to say no to a gift from the government. No? So we think that it's very important in a process of social development, understand from the inside a territory, understand the actor of the territories. So we work through participatory process and its actors. So we worked with the women. For example, in the first meeting that we had with the community, the women were at the back of the space, and we asked to the community chief to invite them to move to the front. And Pasquale, the chief, threw a blanket on the first floor, on the first row, and the women sat there. From then on, we didn't have to ask for it, and the women always participate. The children, we developed workshops with children, trying to think from the scale of kids and their perception, trying to free ourselves from the adult centrism, no? Because when we work with kids, we always ask to their parents, no? As the children don't have their own opinion, but it's not true. So we worked with the teacher and children too, and we try to research how native community live in a space and how the teacher make class with kids. And in this case, you can see table and chair, but they didn't use table and chair. They sit on the floor because for native community, the most natural way of living is in the contact with the floor, with the land, no? And so we started trying to imagine how can we make part of our design their costumes and their objects of daily life. So we imagine the students learning in a space with mats in the floor, learning in the nature, in classrooms without walls, and we reimagine the concept of educational architecture and the role that educational architecture have. From an urban perspective, we reinterpret the urban grid of the community because their assessments is in putting houses and generating intermediate spaces with the little patios or big patios where they live together. So in the architectural proposal of the school, we try to generate these dimensions. And we create a new name for a space that already exists in a school but we understood that it was very important to give a name of a space. In this case, we design a space that is called the forest classroom, where the kids could learn with nature. And here it is, the patio for everyone, the intermediate spaces, and the patios between classrooms. Where we need to put walls, we generate panels that could be opened to connect interior and exterior spaces, and we promote classrooms without walls that connect with the forest classroom that there is. The mats are used for sitting, and the walls could open to connect the interior and exterior spaces. In this process to try to understand the way to integrate local materials, local customs in the architecture, we design together with the community the object for the school. In this case, the basket could be used as lamps, or the kushmas that are the typical clothes of the native communities are used as a ceiling textile divisions, or the mats with palms are used for the walls or for sitting. And here there is a little video. Now imagine in the jungle schools with quality infrastructure and young people being agents of change in their own territory, guardians of local culture and knowledge. One classroom at a time, one forest at a time. It was we dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this really very inspiring lecture, for me to see all these, I would say, very different and also very similar in the process and an approach to architecture and urban design and community. I wrote down so many questions, so even if you don't have any, I can fill this time up. My first question would be, it was very visible that the community is crucial part of the development of anything, from the scratch, and scratches literally, to the building construction and usage. How easy is to involve the community, get them trust the builder, the newcomer in their village, and make them work with you and cooperate and participate in the process? Because we have I think a little bit of idea how it works in here. Now here it looks much easier, at least from what you showed us. What is the process? Can you describe it more?
I think that in my speech there is a risk that it could interpret as a romantic way to make architecture, but no, it's a very difficult process, and the main fight and achievement and the challenge for us was to achieve the trust of the local communities, you know. At the beginning, the communities didn't trust us because the outsider generally is someone that wants something from their territory. And in this case, I think that in the beginning, when they started seeing that the school coming to be a reality, they trusted us. In this case, was the first school that we built, and it was this school in 2013 in Chuquibambilla community. And I remember that the community was very untrusted, and they didn't want, you know. But now in this area, we have we work together with the community, and we have a lot of agreement with the local indigenous associations. We have an agreement with the local municipality, with local Ministry of Education. So, of course, that it is a work of a process of 10 years. So now it's different, but at the beginning it was very difficult. And the participatory process is fundamental to generate appropriation, not only for the infrastructure, not only for the design, but also for the management of the school, because the rural community are very isolated in very remote areas. So
you said it took 10 years to build this school particularly, or how long does because you said you are 10 years in Peru?
10 years, and 14 years in Peru, 7 in the jungle. But now I work in the jungle too, no? I stay in Lima, and I travel in the north and in the central jungle where we had...
And then how long these projects, these 4 that you showed us, took? From the first idea, we need to build a school or community center somewhere, to actually finish the construction? What's usually the process, how long it takes?
Yeah, we self-manage projects only where we have an office, where we stay physically, you know. And we identified a lot of community that need schools. And we apply for fundings through grant writing, through application with international cooperation. And the process could be from 1 year to 3, 4, 5 years, depends on the fund generally. And we found fundings for a school, and we put together with the fund of the local government. So it's 50% from the international cooperation and 50% from the local government. Now, at the beginning, no. At the beginning, there was we had the support of Costa Foundation and Vol Café, and we started with the first school. But after that, we believed that it was too much important that local government was involved, you know, because yeah, it's fundamental, and it was very important for the communities too, no? Because these communities are invisible in front of the eyes of the local government.
That's, I think, quite also obvious from the pictures you show, the inspiration in the projects from the local sources, material, community culture, how they are being used to being educated or learn stuff and what they need to learn. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? What have you learned from the communities in the Peruvian jungle, and you work with it in architecture? What's the example?
The way to work, because we in the university, we started practicing some studios of architecture, and we have a mindset very strict. The process, the drawing, the construction, the manage. No, and when I started working in the jungle or in Lima, this mindset didn't work, didn't function. No, it's not the way, you know. So the way of communities, the collaborative way of the native community mainly, no? The concept of living together is the main leadership that I have. Yeah, not only in professional way, for the life, or as a person, you know. Yeah.
Concept we a little bit forgot here. That's true in big cities for sure. What's you said about collaboration? It's not just with, I guess, with the local community, but with other professionals that you work on this project at. What are the other professions that you work with, and are they local, or are they from your like from the communities, or from your studios, or from maybe some like global NGOs, or etc.?
Yeah, in our team there are architects and of course a legal support and management support and accountant support, and for the project we receive support from anthropologists, sociologists, etc. But when I speak about the integral framework of the project, I refer to the builders, to communities, no? Yeah, all these professions, no? The leaders, the management. It's not only the design and the building. Mm-hmm. It's much more.
Yeah, it's much more complex, and I think working with sociologists and anthropologists and people focused on the participatory processes, because that's something that definitely architects, or at least from my perspective, and definitely here in the Central Europe or in Prague, we need to learn by doing. It's not something that's taught on school, that's how you do architecture. I don't know what's your experience. How was your education and your approach before you came to Peru, or how did you appear in this more, let's say, social way of creating architecture?
Yeah, and another leadership was the learning by doing, no? Of course. No, before, no, the research, the methodology, the drawing, no? Sometimes we draw a detail, but in the reality is different, no? In the construction site. So, yeah, and I teach for 8 years in Lima, in UCAL University, and we had workshop, a studio, and we break this scenario of the academical format, you know, because we went with students in the work site, and we built and we learned from the communities, and yeah. We built a memory center in Lima, very nice project. We work with a very special community. Mm-hmm.
One last question, and then I give you the word to the audience. I know one of my close friends works in the NGO sector, UN, and she goes to missions to Uganda, Afghanistan, and the examples that you showed today, that the government or these big global NGOs come to help. That's their intention to different areas of the world. And they apply their approach to housing, as you show the cement buildings or concrete blocks. And it's so not how the local communities are used to live and how they are used to build stuff, and the materials are so foreign, and they also don't work in earthquakes and etc. It can be actually dangerous. And this is a little bit more of an intellectual, philosophical question. Why do you think that we still are not able to learn from the locals and take their way of living as actually the ground floor for developing these places after disasters of wars or whatever happens? Why do you think we are so stuck in the concrete way, of cement way of building architecture?
I think that the concrete or the walls are in our mind, no? As I show in the first image, because we think that our mindset is the best for the others, no? So we need a process of decolonization of our mind, I think. Not because our proposals are not good, but because we need to adapt to different contexts with a lot of respect of the others' culture, ways of living, you know. And about the materials, I think that depends, because now all the materials are industrialized. So it's not only the use of a material, it's the standards and the fast construction and the epoch of
the effectiveness and the pace of the building. And I think it's super important to realize that the cookie cutter solutions, that does not really work in the architecture. And I think we understand that when we build museums and buildings here in Istra, but then if we say, okay, it's emergency, like we need to build something fast, but still the concrete cookie cutter buildings, it should not be the solutions, though we are still doing it and we are funding it from our taxes in Istra. So now let's have questions from the audience. Who wants to ask something? There, first question.
Thank you so much for the lecture. How did you start in the field of educational architecture, and what pushed you to make your first project?
¿Cómo empezó? Sí. Okay. I studied in Italy museology and exhibition spaces in my master's degree. And when I arrived to Peru, I arrived with civil service. That is governmental program of Italy that give the opportunity for young people to participate in international cooperation project or missions. So in this case, I went to Peru to work for an educational project in a school. But when I arrived to Peru in Lima, the school where I had to work didn't exist. So it was a destiny, I think, but I built my first school in Huaycan, in a human settlement of Lima, and I learned from the community how can we do in a collaborative way a construction, and after that, I really loved pedagogical architecture and pedagogy in general. No? I read books of Paulo Freire and how can we connect the pedagogical methods with the spaces, and yeah, and after that, yeah, after that, I moved to the jungle in 2013, thanks to the invitation of a friend, this Bastian Friules, my great friend, and he worked in a coffee company, and he wanted to promote social project in his company. And he invited me and 3 more friends to design and to apply for a fund to build a school in the jungle. And I moved to the jungle in 2013. And after that, I really loved this work in collaboration with the communities, not only the design, but the managing too. But it was very hard and difficult and sacrificed work, I think. But now, yeah, we are very proud of the work that we make.
Thank you. I hope that somebody would ask the questions. Also, one of mine, and somebody else. No? Oh, there.
Thank you. Thanks for the lecture. I wanted to ask you if all the funds for the 4 projects were for these funds you applied at the beginning, or if there are like a governmental alliance too, or how does this work?
The funding, you mean? Yeah. So
yeah.
How the funding worked in each of these projects? Or?
Yeah, in this specific project, it's apart from the international cooperation and apart from the local government, from the municipalities. In the case of Altanapatti, that is the last project, it was a co-managed project with the Germany Foundation and local municipality. In the other case, in the forest classroom was found from Germany, and yeah, each project is different, really. And in the beginning, we designed the management strategy, really, sometime together with the community.
And how much these schools usually cost? What is the approximately in euros or?
Yeah, in these last 2 years, the construction cost increased too much, really. And in the beginning, we built a school with $300 for a square meter, and now it's the double or much more, because for the transportation cost is very difficult. I think that a pack of cement costs 3 times more than a cement in an urban area. No, so it depends, because the transportation cost is the most difficult thing to do.
Some other questions? Here?
Hello, thank you for the great presentation. And I was just wondering, I've never been to Peru, but I can imagine that the climate is quite warm and humid and lots of rain, I guess. What is the expected lifespan of the materials that you use? Yes, they are locally sourced. I guess that they can be quite durable, but I was just wondering what's the how durable it is.
If I don't know if I understand.
How long the materials are gonna last? Do you think in the humid, rainy climate?
In Peru there are 180 micro climate different in the country. So in this case we are in the jungle, so it's a tropical weather, and yeah, a lot of sun and a lot of rain, and we use cement for the foundations, armored concrete for columns or woods or timber structure, and yeah, we try to protect the wood from the direct sun and from the rainwater, and we try different technologies for roofs. No, because yes, and we have to respect the local standards for a public school too. So we use different technology for roof, for the noise of the rain in the roof, no? Because generally they use the zinc.
Metal, basically.
Metal, no, but the noise is terrible. When yes, now we are using wood panels with asphaltica. I don't know, that with asphalt on the top. Yeah. Yes, that this material came from Lima or the other side, but we use, when we can, bricks made in the site, and wood or bamboo, or depends on the area of the project, you know. But the duration, it's okay. Of course, that we have difficulties for the maintenance of the school. Because the budget is very low, no? And now we have 15 schools and 2 students' residencies, and you know, it's a little difficult to monitoring all the projects. But we do it together with the Ministry of Education, that is in charge of the management of the schools.
And so is there like expectation time, how they're gonna, is it for 40, 30 years, 50 years? Do you have,
yeah,
you will just see as it goes?
A school that is built by the government, I think that is 20 years, and we expect the same or much more.
Because also I think what we don't realize, that the wood that's sourced in the rainforest, it's much more durable than the wood we have here, like spruce, that we use a lot.
Depends on the wood, no? Yeah. And this knowledge came from the communities, because the normatives
they don't apply.
No. Yeah. So the community know what is the best wood that we could use.
That's quite interesting, because here we, for example, we are used to putting trees in the streets just like by knowledge, common sense, that we know that we did the malolisté lípy. And then when we actually did the linden trees, and then we actually did the analysis what trees are most durable, we found out it's completely different trees. That's also, I think, part of the community, the knowledge of the people is actually being lost in systems like big cities where you have all the paragraphs and legal laws that you need to follow to put through new city development or strategies. So it's actually great that you can ask people and they tell you what's the best approach.
And at the beginning, communities say us, no, I don't know. But in the participatory workshop, this knowledge
comes out.
Yes. And it's amazing. And the way to share knowledge is not the same. It's not writing, it's drawing or in other ways. So it's very magic. How can we learn from the inside? How can we learn from the communities? Because the communities don't value their own knowledge, of course, because from the outside they receive critics, they received you are undeveloped, but it's a different way to life. Mm-hmm.
That's great point. Some other questions that come to your mind? Because there's nothing on the Slido. I'll check it again. Oh, there, one more.
Yeah. What methods do you use for the participatory workshops, and especially with kids, and like how you develop them? And it's specifically interesting with kids because I think here we're already starting slowly to use participatory processes and in urban planning, but I'm very curious about how to involve kids in it and to get the material out of it.
And we design spaces thinking about what people want to do in these spaces. So the first exercise that we do when we arrive to the community is to transform us in an invisible person that observe, so in an ethnographical way to understand the context. And I remember that in 2013 when I moved there in the community, I was really surprised at how they live their way for living, and I learn a lot, And this is the first exercise. After that, we work together with the teachers too. And for example, for us, it's very, very important the concept of the time and how the school is connected with the communal activities. Because, for example, I don't know, they have a period of time in which they plant, in which they cosechan, no sé cómo se dice.
Harvest.
Yeah, and all the activity in the school are connected with the life in a rural area, in a campestrian area, no? So we research about this, about the celebration that the community have. After that, we research about the agenda of a typical day with the community, with the kids. and the pedagogical methodology, no? That is a traditional methodology, but in rural areas for native community in initial school and in primary school, there are native teachers. So they connect their own knowledge with the curricular activities. And it is very interesting because the infrastructure doesn't reflect these differences, you know? So the standards are the same for an urban area, for a rural area, for a native community, for it's a standard modules in all the country, no? And they don't respect the climate conditions, for example, or the pedagogical proposal that the teachers have.
That I think is also very interesting for us, definitely Czechs, to realize, because here the climate in Czech Republic overall is quite the same. We have a little bit more cold in the mountains around, but otherwise it's just the same. But even in small countries, because Peru is not huge, it can be very different, and it influences everything. The basis is just so different when the climate is such a different. It can be like severe winters and very hot summers, or in the tropical is the same kind of. So that's true that these playbooks that are very generic can then sometimes make more harm than help. That's true. Somebody else has another question? Here. It's a very active corner here.
This side.
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much again for the presentation. It was very nice. I have a question. In my mind, a school is a tool. It's a tool to promote education, to educate people. And then education, from my perspective, has the power to give people the possibility to decide about their future, to become more independent of their environment, etc. So something that should be very positive, have a positive impact on their lives. However, that depends a lot on what is being educated or what the curriculum is. And it can go any direction. Education can teach hate. It can teach negative things. So I would like to know how you steer the curriculum, how you're involved or your organization is involved with the decisions of what is being taught at those schools, who it's being controlled by, who has the ownership of what will be taught.
It's a very deep question, and yeah, it's very difficult to answer because, yes, of course, I think that the education is a tool for freedom, and everyone had the right to be educated and to have a school. No? But the education is an instrument to colonize too. And yeah, we could learn about maths, literature, history, but in this case we generate a void between local knowledge and civilization, you know, because in native community, students left to go with their parents to the river, to the forest, and they forgot about their knowledge and territory, and no, to go to school. But the school doesn't prepare them to our society. So it's very difficult. We, in the first 10 years, we built school. We didn't reflect a lot about pedagogical projects, but now we are starting to reflect about that. In the project of First Lab, the technological and environmental laboratory in Mencoriari, we break our wall in our mind because it was, wow, yeah, we built schools, but the students couldn't have access to university, and they don't have the possibility to study other things, but they lost the local knowledge too. So what are we doing, you know? So with this project, the territory of knowledge, we try to promote a different type of pedagogical project, connecting the spaces and architecture with pedagogy. And we are in dialogue with the Ministry of Education right now, and it's our future challenge.
Wow, I really didn't thought there would be from an architect answer to your question, but there is. It really shows how we as architects and people who are more on the, let's say, technical and they're building environment and creating spaces should be more involved, or at least aware of what's actually happening in the spaces and why, and what we want to promote or what we don't want to promote and enhance or not enhance. So I'll end up with a last question to reflect. You just showed one example of how you changed or how you developed your approach and strategy to developing schools in this environment, that you are now more focused on the pedagogy as well and the education specifically. What are other things, how in the 14 years you are in Peru, how the approach changed gradually? What do you do different now that you did at the beginning?
Yeah, in the beginning in Semillas, we wanted to generate access to education for remote communities. No? So we thought about architecture, design, the atmosphere that we want to create in a school, the sense of freedom that we want to create in a school, the connection between playful areas with the pedagogical areas, so the use of local materials and all these things. And now this, no? And I explain this in 3 steps, because I think we are architects, so our mindset is of an architect, and I love it. I really love it, because we see the world in a very
complex contextual
context, and so I explain it in 3 steps, because our first intervention is the infrastructure. So the infrastructure is the seed. So we create a box to develop pedagogical activity. And now we are in the step of the 3 pedagogical projects. And we connect the pedagogical project to the architecture, because we think that the local knowledge have to be explained to the rest of the globe. So, for example, now we are making some pedagogical spaces through participatory process, and the space is a space that So it's an exhibition space. In the north, we are making an agro lab, and we research the problems that the community have with the coffee and with their economical situation. And together with the community, we are transforming the space in a museum of the coffee. And the museum is a space where we learn together, because we built it in a participatory way with the kids, with the students, and the results of a participatory workshop is the exhibition space. So it's a way to put together the voices of the community and of the different actors of the society, no? And to connect. And we do that through architectural design, but connecting research to this design and the pedagogical method.
So in that sense, the architecture is the tool for experimental and experience learning, like learning by experience.
It's the tools that we have.
Yeah.
We are architects.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Marta, for really such an interesting and also very normal, basically, I would say, like natural approach to architecture, because we are building environments and spaces for people to live, not to be photographed in magazines. Like, that's not why we create what we create.
And the beauty is very important too, no?
And we totally saw it. We totally saw it. It works both in the magazines, but it also works in the real environment. And it was really exciting to hear you. Thank you very much, all of you, to coming. I hope you will all bring something back to you to reflect and maybe to also incorporate in your work. If you're architects or different people in the field, definitely people interested in architecture and city development. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much, Marta, and one more clap for her. Thank you.